Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Remember to use code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, or parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
At Parker, our purpose is simple. We want to make the world a better place by working more efficiently, by using more sustainable practices, by developing better technologies. We keep moving forward. With each new idea, innovation, and partnership, we're one step closer to fulfilling our purpose every single day. To find out more, visit parker.com/purpose. Parker, engineering your success.
Hashtag no music, no intro. Friend of the podcast. I know that's such an esteemed title you've looked
Friend
for.
of the pod.
Friend of the pod. Anousha Sakoui of the Los Angeles Times joining us. This is your third time, I think
it might be, yeah.
Third time. You're I mean, we don't have pod mileages, like it's not like an airline, but like you're racking them up.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have that concierge card soon.
Gonna be like up in the air, and you're like, oh, this is all I get. Just okay, cool.
All right, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. We haven't spoken to you in feels like forever, and I feel like since the last time we spoke, so much has happened in Hollywood, just in terms of streaming, with COVID kind of easing, how that's working in Hollywood. But the first place I want to start, and we want to start, is you wrote a marvelous, tremendous article for the LA Times. Everyone should read it. Please make the time to read it. Talking about women of color, people of color, diversifying and finding their own platforms and creating their own platforms to get a mark and make a mark in the entertainment industry. It was a tremendous piece, and you talked to, Ava DuVernay and just other people, and then it was at the hashtag Start 8 Hollywood, which I was going through that hashtag yesterday. Like, what came about of why you wanted to tell this story and how it even came about?
Well, firstly, thanks for your kind words. I appreciate that. It's great to do stories where, people are happy to tell their story. So I'm kind of, you're kind of lucky to have that. But basically, I write about production and sort of the working of Hollywood. And, the lack of diversity is something that remains a major issue. And for those that want to see change, how does that happen? Because there's been a lot of talk for many years, but the numbers, show still big gaps. There are some crafts where, there is hardly any diversity. So, it's I think, cinematography and, for example, and some of the arts, arts departments have on film sets and film crews have very low representation. And, I'd written a bit about, the struggles of writers, Black writers in Hollywood, and generally the sort of whiteness of unions, the big, powerful unions in Hollywood. And one thing that I was wondering about is the pipeline, how do you get into Hollywood, and what is the problem there? There's clearly an issue. And because we're not seeing the numbers change. And what I saw was there was a lot of groups that were reaching out to me and that I was seeing online on Twitter and other social media, where really like different like marginalized groups that are underrepresented in Hollywood were forming their own networks to mentor each other, give each other breaks in the industry, give them, create a safe space. Who You Know is one of what was like a 15,000 member Facebook page for the industry, started by an executive who works at Reese Witherspoon's production company, and called Bree Frank. And that's just like a safe space for for people to get mentorship and get connections, because that's the whole thing about Hollywood, is that it's a lot about who you know. So I wanted to take a look at these kind of different networks that were helping people get their first break or get some progress in the industry.
Yes, I just I read your article twice, and I loved it because it kind of hits on it. Something I really appreciate. I love movements and people that come together and kind of form these coalitions and pushes to not just advocate for something, but like, okay, let's put something together and like actually create action. You know what I'm saying? Like not, and that's not to denigrate like protests or call to actions and stuff like that. But I mean, like, actually, let's put together groups and form apprenticeship programs or mentorship programs or some actionable things that actually like make change.
Right.
Because go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's a recognition that the big studios and big media companies, they have some programs, they have fellowships. They've been for increased diversity for like 10, 20 years, some of them. But the numbers are what the numbers are, and
Right.
And they are not representative at the minute. So I think, like I talked to Stephanie Dunn, a professor at Morehouse, and she, was saying they kind of highlight the importance of having networks that exist outside of the system. And when you think that system is like generally white male led, then, there are unfortunately barriers that exist. And so everybody needs mentorship and connection in whatever industry you're in, right? But if if there's no one that not that you can't connect, if you're a person of color, you can't connect with people who are white or whatever, but it's about community and networks. And when you're hiring, who you're hiring from. And it's just a trend that people talk about that. For example, if you're hiring for a film crew, you're going to hire maybe people that that you've worked with before, and it's all about it perpetuates in the current system. So I think that's what these networks are trying to challenge. And also, I think also in terms of, I found the Who You Know group kind of very interesting in that, it's own, like, it is a closed private group. And Bree Frank was very, when I talked to her about it, very kind of strict about the idea that, like, okay, you may be an ally, like a white ally or whatever, but this has to be a safe space. And so she's really keeping it to that and understanding that, there's a lot of judgment, that there's a lot of repercussions that can happen to people if, they can fear speaking about situations. So I thought that was very interesting. The fact that, you kind of need that space. People, clearly thousands of people felt the need to create that space. So I think that tells you a lot about the industry.
Absolutely. And being that you're a woman of color, what, kind of off topic, but along the same line, like, how did you break into the industry that is so difficult? Obviously, you're on the media side, but still, there's still barriers and obstacles for women in general, especially women of color, in the entertainment industry or in any form of media. How was your journey in terms of getting to where you are with the LA Times?
Right. So I'm half Iranian, half Welsh, if you want to be specific. And I was born in London, grew up in London, and I'm I think if you looked at me, you could say, I, definitely light skin. So I'm not someone who I think has the same struggle as, a lot of the people that I've spoken to, Cheryl Bedford in this, and some of the actual workers talk about, the role of colorism as well, in trying to get hired in Hollywood. So for me personally, I don't getting into journalism in the UK was, I think, more of a factor for me, and I think a lot of journalism, unions have brought this up, is the idea that is your background in terms of like, can you afford to work for free at the beginning of your career?
Yeah.
And that is a big, people recognizing, especially in journalism, one of the reasons there's a lack of diversity in newsrooms is because, many people can't afford to do that. And yet that's how I got into the industry. Like, it was through someone, I think the first kind of bit of work experience I got through a friend of a friend, and it was for free. And then also, and that sort of then became, full-time work. And then when I got when I got my first reporting job, I really wasn't paid very much. Like, so it was, I had the ability, I had the privilege of having parents that I could live with, or that could pay for this, that, and the other, and that were helping support me. So I think you've seen that in a lot of the unionization of newsrooms across the US, very much that and it's in podcasting as well. We saw The Ringer in LA, and Gimlet just recently agree a contract with a union contract under the WGA, the Writers Guild of America East, actually, with their owner Spotify, to create a base salary, and they also include, as part of their terms, making sure that when there's an interview process, that there's a diversity of people that are considered in the interview process. So I know, and I think that's true in Hollywood as well, and in film and entertainment, that not everyone can be affording to work for free or whatnot. So if opportunities to do internships mean working for free, then that's going to limit the pool of people who can get into the industry. So that's kind of what I'd say to that.
And we see the same debate. I see the same debate on Twitter all the time, like from sports, enthusiastic sports, young people. They're like, hey, I want to get into sports writing and all that stuff. How do I get in? And a lot of people would give them advice like, look, you just got to start a blog, start writing for free, or go write for this blog or that blog, and, just get yourself in the door and get people to view your stuff. And then, maybe you get a job down the line, maybe, and I'm just thinking like, man, if he doesn't have parents looking out for him, or if if he's just a kid, that just, doesn't have the resources to even think like that, it's like, oh, good luck, man. Like, better go get a job.
And that's the interesting thing that a lot of people that I spoke to say, like, when I spoke to Ava DuVernay and I spoke to James Doohan, who's a cinematographer who's on this database Array Crew, which basically was her solution to when she would hear, like, people that say they were producers that were trying to diversify their all-white crew, trying to say, well, I don't know, any Black cinematographers, I don't know any Asian grips, or whatever. Like, so she and there are other lists like this, but she created this database that can be easily used, and the cost is managed, is basically absorbed by the studio. So it's not something that producers can say, oh, this is an expense that I've got to add if I want to add diversity. So people can list themselves on that database, and I think talking to people, there's I spoke to James Doohan, who's a cinematographer, and he's based in Dallas. One of the things that he was saying to me was that a lot of people don't know that you can earn good money in this industry, and that it's an industry that can be open to a wide group of people, especially as now, like, you have the technology is more accessible, right? It's not like you have to have with given what the iPhone can do. If you want to get into being creative, you've got platforms like YouTube and a lot of different technology that in some ways can make it more accessible, but I think it's also the knowledge of knowing what jobs are available, that you can make money, and good money in being crew. So yeah.
Let's kind of going back to the amount of time it's been since we talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a plethora of things that has happened, but you kind of hit on it, being that you are from London. I think we got to kind of hit on like the whole Meghan Markle and the Oprah interview a little bit, right? Like,
how are you doing about the prince?
It's I think they're going through it over in the UK. I mean, they've got
the least.
They've got wall-to-wall television coverage for days. So it's I think for me personally, it was sad, not because just because it reminded me of my British grandparents, just because they were exactly the same generation. So it sort of reminded me of their passing. But I think when anybody high profile dies, it's sort of like, for me anyway, kind of, we had DMX pass on the same day. And so I think that always, I don't know if about you guys, but it always reminds me about those that have passed in my life, and it always makes me a bit sad. But I don't know if you saw this, some of the reporting out of the UK that, that some of the channels like the BBC were actually getting complaints because there was too much royal coverage, and people were sick of it. So
wow.
Yeah. No, the Prince Harry, Meghan Markle interview with Oprah, that was obviously huge TV event. And that was very interesting. Obviously, that was had so many shocking revelations, and it's obviously going to be interesting to see what happens, going forward. That how long has the Queen got now? She's really pushing. So, there's kind of, it's like a sort of beginning of an end of an era in a way. It's going to be changing, and it's who knows how it's going to develop. It's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, and will it keep going? Because I wonder how you feel about it, since you are, you're from London, and being in America, how we kind of look, as big stupid Americans, how we just kind of look at just the whole royal family, how we just kind of make.
It's interesting that you guys bring it up. I didn't even know if you guys are following it. I mean, I thought, yeah. What do you?
I really, honestly, I don't follow it closely.
Oh,
but
you do.
It's always just kind of, it's there.
Yeah.
All my life. All my life it's just something that's there. The royal family, and sometimes I step back and I'm like, it's just so weird that there's like a royal family and princes and queens, and
it is weird.
What the hell is going on? But as just someone who loves history, I've been digging deep into World War One, and of course World War One is about the fall of all these old dynasties, empires, monarchs falling, and it just feels like that's like one of the last ones still standing.
Are you going to recommend some good books that we need to get into? What are your resources for this?
I don't have books.
Watching documentaries?
I don't have books. I've been watching Apocalypse, World War One.
Oh, interesting.
That's a real good one.
Is that on Amazon?
It's on HBO Max, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
It's really good. All colorized.
I'll check that out.
Oh wow! All
colorized? It's colorized, and it's. The production is beautiful. It's beautiful. Beautiful. But yeah, I just wonder, how do you view how America view the royal family?
There's a commentator called Bonnie Greer who you guys should look up on Twitter, and she's a long-time cultural commentator. I think she's American actually, but she's been in the UK. I think I remember her having an American accent. I used to watch her on TV when I was younger as well. She really kind of hits a nail on the head, I think, because it's complicated. It really is not as straightforward as I think is from an American viewpoint, I think Americans kind of view it as a sort of celebrity thing,
Uh-huh.
because in America, obviously, you don't have that as part of. You don't have unelected people who have power and wealth. Well, no, you obviously do have unelected, but you know what I mean. They don't have those they don't have the position.
Yeah.
They're not heads of state.
Right.
So and I think anytime that you see so I think it's like something hard to relate to if you're American. And I think for British people, there are so many. I think people people have lots of different experiences of it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
um I think to quote I'm going to quote Bonnie, because I think she really kind of hits it. She captures it in a way that is very hard to understand from the outside. She says it's really difficult to explain to many outside of this country this love-hate royal family thing. The love is fierce and the hatred is fierce and the indifference is fierce. And it's kind of true. Like, I think from day to day, like, you're not really thinking about it. It's just part of your
Yeah.
culture in a way, that history, and also just, yeah, it is part of the culture. But at the same time, it's people who have unparalleled power and wealth through
Do
birth.
you sometimes get defensive about it? Like, I know, like, when people talk about New Orleans,
Yeah,
like people talk about New Orleans is just like I don't know if you've been there, but it's a
I
different
haven't, but I
city.
want to.
Oh,
Yeah,
like,
I think to some degree they sort of represent to the outside world the UK, aren't they? It's sort of like a soft power in some respects. That's
yeah,
kind of what they are. And like, we talk about their effects on tourism, and you know that yeah. So it can make you think, oh, if they're shown in a bad light,
yeah.
it can make people. I think the response out of the UK after the Meghan and Harry interview with Oprah was a certain amount of defensiveness. I mean, you saw
Hmm.
TV broadcasters like Piers Morgan sort of like getting very, very stressed about it, and ultimately
Exactly.
kind of like having to walk out of his job. So um but I think it's been interesting as well, like especially for me, um trying to understand. I've always thought that, like, in the US, there's more of an openness. Well, I wouldn't say like an openness, but there's definitely, I would say, the conversation around race and gender is more, I would say it's a bit more progressive than in the UK, where it hasn't really, I don't think it's as evolved.
Really?
And yeah, and I think, I often see people talk about, how racism in the US and the UK is different. And um, I think that, I mean, obviously, I'm not a specialist in talking about it in any way, shape, or form, and there are much more interesting, relevant people to comment on it. But
Yeah.
I think it's definitely interesting, and I think it made me think about my own identity, and especially if you're Iranian, you're like, well, when you're mixed Iranian, like, you always like, what box do you tick,
Hmm. Hmm.
so like, you're not, I wouldn't really call myself, I call myself British because I am that, by birth and nationality. That's what I am. But it's, I think, whenever you're kind of mixed, you kind of like, how you identify. It's just not something I'd really thought about much when I grew up.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to think about, being made to think about, really, uh, what prejudices there are, if you're picking, like, when you're thinking about which of your cultures you're leaning on most, or valuing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And um so I think it's very interesting like that. And I think it's very interesting to see the UK kind of go through, confronting its history, and uh, in a way that there aren't the kind of big voices like there are here, I think, in the same way. There are some, and that I'm really pleased to see the media in the UK elevating many voices, diverse voices. I'm glad to see that. And it would be great to see more diversity in newsrooms, and I think it's starting to happen, as much as it should happen here as well.
Uh, it's funny you bring up identifying race as a father to a daughter who's half black, a quarter white, a quarter Korean, and but for all intents and purposes, anyone who looks at my daughter, they all just feel and assume that she's black. That is something that at some point, like you said, she's going to have to, self-identify in terms of the things that you hit on. So that's a
Mm.
very very good point. Um, in regards to these insane streaming wars
Hmm.
that are now ongoing. So we had you on right when the crazy HBO Max
Right.
Warner thing happened, and I don't know any insight on it, but I would say that to a degree it's been a success. Um, in terms of for HBO Max, in terms of
Hmm.
that plan, I know it was not viewed well by the theater industry, and with
Hmm.
COVID kind of relaxing, the theater at some point is going to make its way back. A couple of days ago, we got the news that I guess Sony had signed some type of deal with Netflix, so like they have
Right.
like the first right to the street, for streaming. There's Discovery Plus, there's Paramount Plus, there's Peacock, which like bought basically like the WWE network for like $1 billion. Like it's just the streaming industry is just absolutely insane. And even the TV deals that the NFL was able to secure with the TV networks,
Hmm.
and Amazon and all that. Wherever you want to take us in regards to it, like just what are your thoughts in general? It doesn't have to be anything specific, but
Yeah.
just
I mean, I think it's really interesting. Just trying to think what. So, I think it's interesting because like clearly what's happened over the past year has accelerated um, this thing that we've talked about, which is like the speed at which big movies come into the home, right? And so it's really accelerated or reduced that window. And that was something that I think in Hollywood that's been pushed for by the big studio since I think 2011 is the first kind of date that is kind of, it's one of those sort of landmark dates, when I think the Universal tried to do it with a movie called Tower Heist, and it didn't really,
the Ben Stiller movie.
so it didn't really plan out as they wanted to. But now obviously after the Mulan experiment with from Disney, and they're going to be doing a similar thing with
Black Widow.
Black Widow.
That's big news.
Yeah, so I think that clearly that's fine, that they've and Disney was you know at the extreme when it came to having their movies play the longest in theaters. So it's interesting to see them embracing that premium video on demand as kind of something ongoing. And so that's one element. I think on the other side, I think one thing that I'm thinking about a lot now is the sort of getting back to normal, whatever that is for Hollywood, as more and more of us are vaccinated, and California is going to fully reopen. Lots of places are reopening, and we had the sort of pandemic record that Godzilla versus Kong set when it was released earlier this month. So that's given some support to the release of movies this summer, maybe. So I think like those are the kind of, I think we're starting to see the box office come back. So I think that's going to help us sort of help the industry find its feet in a way of like how much is now going to be box office and how much of it is going to be streaming. Like how much, what films are, that's what we're going to have to discover. Like what are the films that can survive now at the box office, or that can really draw an audience, and what is going to be
Interesting.
at home. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also wonder how the fact that the companies get to keep this viewer data private
Mm,
versus the box office numbers which come out, everybody
right.
sees this, you can't hide it,
Mhm.
and it absolutely affects how the movie does
Right.
going forward. If a movie bombs at week one, you know, it affects how people think about going seeing it the next week. You know
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying?
for
So
social
so go ahead.
media has played, and you know, executives at studios have talked about this for a long time, but the social media has played a big role in word of mouth and like the survival of a movie, because like back in the day, it could take a while, like from
Yeah,
the first screenings for word to get out that actually it wasn't that good or
yeah,
that it was great. So now it's like Thursday night and everybody knows whether or not it's any good. And
yeah.
I think it's interesting, like, you know, I've spoken to some people who like, you know, in the industry who are like, you know what, actually, maybe we prefer a streaming, you know, a streaming release, because then you don't deal with like those soft opening week numbers and, oh, so-and-so's movie is a bomb. And so, but yeah, but then, you know, as you said, it's kind of interesting, like, what are the numbers? What are the real viewing numbers? You know, Netflix has been increasingly releasing more of its data. But yeah, I think that's going to be something that evolves. And, you know, there are services like Nielsen that I think have been trying to advance how they capture viewing that
Oh,
is,
well,
you know, not linear. So
I
I
didn't know
think
that.
that's going to be interesting. Yeah. So I think like as technology develops, there's probably, you know, I think over time, for example, Netflix in the beginning never used to share any data
Right.
of
Right.
streaming, and now we're at a point where we have a top 10. So you know that you can view when you log on, and who knows what they're sharing privately behind the scenes with producers, and but they also release, so when they do their earnings, they usually release some numbers about, you know, some performance. Like if something does really
Yeah,
well, they tend to remember when
yeah.
Bird Box did really well. I remember that movie with Sandra
Oh,
Bullock.
yes.
That was a massive hit, and you know the birds
The
are in the
the
box.
memes are more popular than the movie.
I know. I never. Yeah, honestly, the memes are hilarious. But yeah, that was massively popular for them.
It was
Yeah,
So
largely because of social media.
yeah,
yeah.
and I think it had. I think if I remember rightly, it was actually released in theaters. I remember it was like in November, and it didn't really do much. And then when it came
No, I
into the
don't think
home
so.
early
Uh-uh.
December, am I
I don't
wrong?
think so. I think it was a straight Netflix movie.
Let me double check. Let me double check, because I remember it being let me see, Bird Box, right? Because I remember it was when it kind of hit the, it was released at home in December. It's
Really?
it blew up. Yeah, I think like most people probably didn't even know that it had a theatrical release. How do I check this? The release date. It says 21st of December. Hold on. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you see, for example, well, it was at AFI, which is the American Film Institute.
Yeah.
They
I-
showed it. They showed it on the 12th of November at AFI. I'm pretty sure they had it in
Interesting.
theaters, but I could be wrong. But let me just check this out. But anyway, yeah. So I think the numbers thing is going to be really interesting. Um, you know, and like what people watch at home, you know, obviously is, you know, it might lead to, you know, yeah, it had a limited release on December 14th. Is that right? Yeah, it was at AFI in
Huh.
November, and then it had a limited release theatrically on December 14th before streaming worldwide on December
That's
21st.
yeah. I had no idea. Look at you being right. That's why she's at the LA Times, folks.
Yeah.
I just, you know, memories. Yeah, I just remember, like, because I remember it being released, and then there was kind of a second huge wave when, you know, it was released in the home. So it's interesting the life that things can have, you know, when they're on a different platform. We've seen that for many like cult shows or whatever that have a second life.
Yeah.
So, you know, and one of the things when we talked about like what favorite shows and films, like I don't think I mentioned Arrested Development. That is like one of my all-time favorites, and that got a major second life on Netflix.
Major. Although I also being a huge Arrested Development fan feels like it maybe should have just stayed at 3 seasons and
Really, I would take. I mean, I don't know. I just yeah, I kind of enjoyed seasons 4 and 5. I think it was the fifth season. Yeah. It was. Yeah, I think you had to be like a bit of an addict to it to like. I'm pretty deep. I'm pretty.
No, I am too. Do you feel like, and I think I know my answer to this, but do you feel like we've reached an oversaturation in the streaming app
Ooh,
department?
that's a big
Like,
question.
like there's a streaming app for everything at this point.
I think the HBO. I think we're still. I think it's too early to say, right? Because there will be winners and losers. People know that there will be. There was this analyst. I probably mentioned it last time I came on, but one of the sort of comments that stuck in my head, over the years, is a media analyst who said that it was kind of like the Hunger Games, and at some point, that not everybody. Yeah, I mean, people have limited income to put towards content, and one of the big issues that my colleague Ryan Faunder has been writing about is the churn. So it's this idea of churn, which is like you subscribe to HBO maybe for the one show you want to watch, and then you cancel, and then for a few more months until they draw you back in. You know what I mean? So that's something that the companies have to deal with, is constant churning in their subscriber base. So, but I think that also the kind of, I feel like some of them have been sort of still streamlining and working on their image. So, you kind of got, there was CBS All Access, but now it's Peacock, and now, HBO Max is like, it kind of seems to have established itself now. It had different incarnations, but, and like HBO Now, HBO Go and all that. So I think there needs to be a certain amount of time of sort of like of grounding and establishing themselves. But I mean, like I was just reading as well about Roku getting into the content game, and coming up with its own content. So Roku, yeah. So
if y'all don't sit your ass down.
Roku.
Just stay in the TV game and the little.
Hey, Anousha, do you know anything about Zeus Network?
No. Hold on.
Okay.
What are you asking me?
No, just don't even worry about it.
Is this something I should be worried about Googling?
No. I mean, it's I paid for it for about 2 months. It's like these VH1 style problematic.
The Real Black China. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just reality TV shows, unfiltered.
Oh, that was for Brie, wasn't it?
Of course. But it was. I mean, I enjoyed it. I paid for like 2 months.
Gravitated straight to that. I clicked straight on that.
It's so problematic and fun. I ain't gonna lie. I was like, why does no one know about this? I tweet about
That's
it.
That's interesting. I like
people
that.
Like, what are you talking? Yeah, people like, what are you talking about? I never heard of this. I'm like, man, this is like VH1/HBO. Like, what are you talking?
There are a lot of kind of, I don't want to say niche, but like curated. I would say this is what you'd call kind of curated channels. There are some other ones, like there's ones for Comic-Con, or like there's a Comic-Con channel. There's definitely I'm just looking it up. I'm pretty sure there's a Comic-Con channel, and there's others. There's a company called what is it? Their name's gone out of their mind. But is there one called Dove as well? I feel like there's a Dove channel. There's a lot of these channels, sort of like that are kind of what you'd call curated sort of channels that sort of, I don't know what to, like. Yeah, Dove channel is another one like I sort of third of, which is family, faith style films as well. So there is a lot of that, and they don't actually, now you mention it, that they're not like necessarily hugely well known, but there's clearly a market for it.
Yeah, and it's I think the market's going to figure it out. It reminds me a little bit of like early, I wouldn't say early internet, but like late 90s internet. You had all these like search engines, you had all these browsers, you had all these different websites that kind of do the same thing, and everybody's just trying to jockey for position. What do we name it? What do we call it? How do we brand it? And then, it kind of crashed, and then, the survivors of that crash kind of figured out how to, navigate the system. And I think that'll happen with streaming. So I think we're kind of in the early phase of seeing how it's going to work. But I just find it all so fascinating. But just I wanted to quickly turn back to the article you wrote about diversity in Hollywood. Um, One thing I appreciated that you pointed out is just, a lot of the focus has been on, actors, actresses, directors, writers, and stuff like that. But really, when you finish watching a movie and it goes off, it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes of credits of just
Yeah.
hundreds of people that went into making a movie. And that's really where the diversity and inclusion needs to take place.
Right.
And I just loved how you pointed out all these little mentorship programs that's happening outside of Hollywood, uh, or finding people that might only have one little credit to their name,
Yeah.
but it's like, hey, they're trying to get in. It's like, I don't remember if you said The Wire was one of your favorite shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a scene where like Dookie's talking to Cuddy, and he's like, "How I get from here to the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Like, how do I even do that?" And
Yeah.
there's so many people out there that's just like, what's the first step do I take? Like, I just want to make one step, and then let me figure it out from there. But how do I get from here to there?
And that's why the networks are so important, because if it's just the same people that are helping the same people kind of get in and know who have those connections. If you don't have those connections to people who are working in the industry, then how are you even going to know? Like, who are you going to turn to even ask? How can it even be a possibility? And like one of the filmmakers I spoke to, called Christina Faith, she is in Philadelphia, so she's outside of those kind of typical filmmaking bubbles, whether it's LA, New York, or Georgia, and Atlanta. And so and it was important to her, she said to me, to stay in Philadelphia because she worked very much with her community, and would train people as well in film production and stuff. And she, through that Start With 8 program, she got distribution for a movie she made with Mark Hood, who was on The Voice, and it's called Love You Right, an R&B musical, I think is the name of it. And so she got a distribution deal through that. That was by really hustling and asking questions, and just being able to get access to the right people to ask questions to. That's what these networks are doing, giving her access to distribution executives or specialists in distribution who can say, okay, this is who you have to target, this is how you should craft your email, this is what you should ask for in your deal. There was a lot of that as well, like Sade Nidia, who I spoke to, who's the cinematographer who leads the story. She got help sort of getting representation from, she was going to interview with the Gersh agency, and she had this major cinematographer through that Start With 8 program, who was cinematographer on the film Destroyer with Nicole Kidman. Her name is Julie Kirkwood, and Sade told me about how, she talked about how Julie kind of just helped her own her, her greatness, if you like, and her self-confidence, and how to pitch herself in those rooms, and what to ask for to protect herself, like what she should get out of it as well, like what boundaries she should set. I think those things are so important, especially as, like, she's a young Black woman cinematographer. There aren't that many of them. So when she's going into these rooms, she's going to be one of the few that do. And, Ava DuVernay said this as well. Like, if you are, you have a disability, or you're a person of color, or you're both, and you're on these sets, sometimes you might be the only one. So I think that, having that support network in surviving the industry is kind of, and progressing is really a key element.
It's so profound, because it's all of it so true. I think we all, when we have guests come on this podcast, kind of whoever we speak to, being that we're Black men and we know how difficult it is to succeed in this country, being African American, it's always a point that we talk about of how is it that we as people, Black people, women, LGBT community, whatever group that are marginalized in this country, how is that? How as a network can, regardless of the field, how we can succeed without being. I mean, no offense to any white men that listen to this podcast, but being a white man, or being white. So, reading your article was good to read that and see people really trying to change the industry for how it is now. And I don't know how long you've covered the industry, but I will ask, have you seen
it's about 2014.
Okay, so we're going on like 7 years, so about 7 years. So have you seen a change in the amount of time that you covered the industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some shift in the numbers in the past, like 1 or 2 years. Like if you look at the, I think it's called the Annenberg Inclusivity research group that's led by Dr. Stacey Smith. They put out a lot of at USC. And the Annenberg Inclusivity Initiative, I think that's right. And they put out a lot of different studies around, diversity, but in front and behind the camera. I mean, generally, I think that what they've said is like over the past decade, I think even when we were looking at Latino filmmakers, one of the shocking stats that they had was,
blew me away.
Yeah, between 2007 and 2018, there was only one director for more than 1,200 movies, popular movies, that was a Latina.
Yeah, I read that. That was insane.
Yeah, right. It's and so I think firstly, I think looking at the numbers, that's like one level of it, and then you can see this obviously the size of the problem. And there have been some of their more recent studies. They looked at directors, and there has been some improvement. And I know that there are different measures like. The Writers Guild has done a study on writers progression. I did a story on that, so that you might be seeing more parity, more equality, more I should say equity at the entrance stage, entry level. But from one of those things that the studies show is kind of like what about seniority and progressing through the industry. So we found that study from the WGA last year showed that there are, many of these programs have helped greater equity at the entry level, but not in sort of like who runs rooms, even for shows about, for shows that are mainly about people of color, So I think that's one of the interesting thing about Cruise as well, is like, even if you're looking at films made by pioneering Black filmmakers, like or Asian filmmakers, or Latino filmmakers, like what does the crew look like? And I think you'll find a lot of it is majority white. So I think that's kind of interesting. So there is some progress, but I think there's still a long way to go.
You touched on it earlier in regards to the passing of DMX. For me, he played a big role in my childhood, because I tweeted about how it just kind of takes me back to a place in my childhood, just being young. Do you have a favorite DMX track?
Thanks. No. I honestly, I'm not going to pretend I'm a big DMX fan. I'm sorry. I love it. But I knew he was. When I was young, when I was a teenager in London, I was a massive NWA, Public Enemy, Ice-T fan. It was random. I know. It was. I had this friend. She was Greek actually, and she introduced me to, I think it was like 14, 15, a totally coddled upbringing in London. I was never really allowed out much anyway, like to go to clubs or anything or concerts, and I massively fell in love with like Ice-T and Public Enemy, and so
Anousha in those London streets was
right,
wild out.
but yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Did you see what happened? A bit big. Oh, well, no, I was going to say a bit bigger of a story in the US, but actually, I went onto the Drudge website, which I haven't done for a while, but I was just checking it out, and they had Philip leading their front page pretty much all day, I think.
Mhm.
So that was kind of strange, I think, for like I guess a right wing website to be sort of very big on monarchy news, but
That sounds
Yeah, it's
right
spot
on
on brand.
brand.
Yeah.
so
Not surprised at all.
so yeah. But well, look, you guys, it's been great talking to you again. I really appreciate you having me on and
Yeah.
giving profile to these stories, and I really hope that the listeners out there get to read them, and if they ever have any feedback or ideas, I'm on Twitter at Anousha Sakoui, and DMs are open. You can send me a message if you want to talk in private, especially if there's anyone who works in the industry anywhere across the country. I'd love to hear from you. And as you said, it's like we talk a lot about stars and people in front of the camera, but really this industry it's a lot of people talk about it being like a working class, middle class industry of like just working people who just like work,
Mhm.
and so who are kind of regular people who, especially over the past year, many have lost a lot of work and haven't been working and had been leaning on their savings and where they have them and trying to get assistance to get through. So those are the kind of stories I want to tell.
Love it.
And we appreciate you for telling them. We're gonna get you out of here. We don't want to keep you too much
I
longer.
appreciate you guys.
The last thing I will say is one of my favorite things that Anousha does on Twitter is when there's like a tweet where like someone's calling something out, just like we would do. She quote tweets this and just put the little eyes emoji.
Yeah, like what I don't know. I don't want to say anything. But
a certified instigator and shit starter. That's why she's a friend of the pod, and she's been on 3 times now. Follow Anousha on Twitter at Anousha Sakoui. Read her articles, read her work. There's a reason why she comes on this pod. We have her on this podcast. We love every time she comes on. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And with that, we're out.
Peace.
Oh, she added the little piece to it too. So you're family.
Gotta.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Remember to use code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, or parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.